Hi everybody, so in this video we are going to be looking at the Sudeten crisis and the Munich agreement. We're going to be looking at where the Sudetenland was and why it was so advantageous to Hitler to have that in his territory. And then we're going to have a look at, again, another agreement that reinforced appeasement. Okay, so reinforced this idea that the British and the French were going to let Hitler get away with more demands that he had to expand his territory. So let's start then by talking about the Sudetenland, having a look at what it was, why Hitler wanted it, and where it was, or is. So by March 1938, Hitler has broken the Treaty of Versailles on several occasions. So, for example, the Rhineland, which we've already discussed, but nothing had been done by any of the major powers of the League of Nations. So remember, reasons for that being that they had a lot going on at home. They wanted Hitler on their side. They wanted to still be able to trade with Germany. A lot of people actually thought that the Treaty of Versailles had been too harsh. So there were many reasons why nobody was getting involved. So Hitler now thinks that he can push this even further. And he wants to invade a country that has very little to do with Germany. So remember, one of the ways that he gets away with Anschluss, with joining with Austria, is by claiming that they had a shared heritage, they had a shared history, and that the German people wanted to be a part of, sorry, the Austrian people wanted to be a part of Germany. Same with the Saar, same with the Rhineland. These were all justified ways in which Hitler took territory. Czechoslovakia and the Sudetenland now doesn't really fall under that same category. So how does he get away with that? So his quest for Lebensraum, now Lebensraum is a German word meaning living space, meant that he turned his gaze towards Czechoslovakia. So Czechoslovakia was a strong nation with a big army, which is important at this time because Hitler had been rearming since 1935, and it has lots of defences on the border with Germany. So to take it, Hitler would first have to take the border region known as the Sudetenland. So why was this so important to Hitler? The Sudetenland is a natural border because it's a very mountainous area, as we will see. So there's a number of reasons why he wanted the Sudetenland. So Czechoslovakia had been formed after World War I as part of the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler had promised to overturn this, so dismantling Czechoslovakia was part of his way of going against the Treaty of Versailles. So Czechoslovakia had a big army and strong fortifications. Obviously, if he can take over that country or that region, he can then use the army and fortifications to his own benefit. The Sudetenland was home to forts, railways and industries, all of which can make money and help him rearming the German army. It had many factories producing glass and lignite, which is a type of coal, as well as the Skoda factory, which could be used to build tanks. We've already spoken about briefly how Hitler used car factories as a front for his weapons development. So it was also home to around 3 million German-speaking people. Now, this is important because this is how he sort of worms his way into the Sudetenland. He says, like in the Anschluss, that the people wanted, you know, they spoke German, therefore they should be part of the Greater Germany. So they were a minority group. They were 20% of the population. They claimed that they had been persecuted by the Czechs and used this as an excuse, again, like we saw in Austria, to start riots. So again, like in Austria, Hitler used this as an excuse. He needed to step in to save German speakers in the Sudetenland. So we can see, you know, this is an area of Czechoslovakia that does have German-speaking people. He can use the same excuses as he's used previously, but he doesn't yet have that excuse in the whole of Czechoslovakia. So the Sudetenland is his way into the rest of Czechoslovakia. It's a good base from which to launch an attack on Czechoslovakia. The area jutted into Germany, which surrounded it on 3 sides. Hitler thought that owning the Sudetenland would be a good strategic move, making his eventual invasion of the rest of Czechoslovakia, spoiler alert, he does invade the rest of it, much easier. So appeasement, we just let him get away with it. So again, like we've just said, similar tactics to the ones that we've seen in Austria. the Nazis started demonstrations to weaken the government. In May 1938, Hitler made it clear that he would fight for the region, claiming that German-speaking people were treated badly by the Czechs and needed protection. So tensions are rising all over. The people can see what Hitler's doing, but again, just let him get away with it. So people have seen Hitler's weapons in action in the bombing, especially of Guernica in the Spanish Civil War. And people are petrified that war would break out on the continent in Europe and that civilians will become the target of the Luftwaffe. Remember, the German Air Force that Hitler wasn't allowed to have originally under the Treaty of Versailles. So politicians in Britain and France racked their brains to find a way to stop Hitler. Now, remember when we spoke about appeasement, we said that eventually they thought he would just be happy with what they'd given him, but obviously that's turning out not to be the case. And Britain and France could be obliged to protect Czechoslovakia and declare war. So they need to come up with a plan now to make sure that Hitler does not take the rest of Czechoslovakia. They need to say, look, you've got the Sudetenland. That's what you wanted. You claim to have wanted that to protect the Germans who are living there. You've got that now, you know, have that and just be thankful for it. So this is where the Sudetenland is. So the grey is the Sudetenland here, and it's given to Germany at Munich in 1938. So we're going to have a look at that now. So on the 15th of September 1938, the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain flew to Berchtesgaden, which was Hitler's holiday home in the German mountains, to meet with the Führer. Hitler told Chamberlain that the crisis could only be resolved if he was allowed the Sudetenland. So he doesn't say, look, there's another way we can work this out. He says, well, you're just going to have to give it to me. Chamberlain was desperate to avoid war, which is a really important point when we're talking about appeasement, and agreed so long as all actions were peaceful. Okay, Chamberlain's actions are known as appeasement, which we spoke about previously. So on the 22nd of September 1938, Hitler returned to Germany and Chamberlain returned to Germany and met Hitler again. And Hitler now changed his demands. He knows he can ask for whatever he wants, and Chamberlain will just agree to it. He now wants the Sudetenland to be handed over by the 1st of October and insisted that Hungary and Poland should also receive Czech land. So remember, it's not just about him gaining some of Czechoslovakia, it's about dismantling Czechoslovakia because it was formed under the Treaty of Versailles. However, this is not what Chamberlain agreed to. So he's now getting more suspicious of Hitler because before he had completely trusted him. So let's have a look then at the Munich Conference. Now, this is an emergency conference which was called in order to try and rein Hitler in. Italy were also there. Mussolini was there as kind of mediator, and Chamberlain wants to now discuss with Hitler what he's actually wanting to get. So Hitler makes certain demands at the Munich Conference, and they were the same as when he'd met Chamberlain, you know, one-on-one in the last meeting. So he wanted the whole of Sudetenland, and then he wanted Czechoslovakia breaking up. So the Czechoslovakian army must leave the Sudetenland, and this area was to be handed over to Hitler. Hungary and Poland. The problem is if Chamberlain were to say to Hitler, okay, on the basis that you've got all of these millions of people who are German and you are claiming this territory on that basis, Hungary would then say, well, what about all the Hungarians living in Czechoslovakia? We should have the portion of Czechoslovakia where the Hungarians live, and the Polish are the same. Well, we have this many Poles living in Czechoslovakia, surely we should be given that area of Czechoslovakia. So you can see how Hitler demanding the Sudetenland creates all of this then one everywhere else. So Hitler demanded that these claims be met and Czechoslovakia be dismantled. And again, Hitler promises peace in Europe in return for the Sudetenland. So it's, give me this and that'll be the last. There'll be no more demands from me. A tactic that's used by him again and again, and that is how appeasement doesn't work. Once you give someone something, they are going to keep demanding more because they know they are going to be allowed it. So other countries reacting to Hitler's demand. Chamberlain and Daladier, so we've spoken about Britain and France, are only too happy to attend the conference in Munich. And so you think, well, that obviously they're going to want to attend. They want to stop Hitler, but they are also really happy to accept his demands. So they were able to then go back to their countries and say that they had prevented war and Czechoslovakia's borders were safe, as Hitler promised that he would respect them. So remember, they are far too trusting of Hitler, which we've spoken about before, okay? They do believe, or they claim to believe, that he is true to his word. So Hitler had got everything he demanded, and on 10th of October 1938, he marches his troops into the Sudetenland, an area that was not his, with no international opposition. So I really want you to think back now to everything we've already discussed in this course. The Treaty of Versailles, the League of Nations, what they stood for and why they were there. And what Hitler has done is just completely dismantled all of that, and he's been allowed to do it. It's really quite hard to get your head around. So without the Sudetenland fortifications, the Czechs were defenseless and they fell to Nazi occupation. The Czech government had not been consulted. So again, as we saw in the Abyssinian crisis, this is another example of when Britain and France have given away land that was not theirs to give away. So we saw in the Abyssinian crisis that Mussolini was allowed to just claim Abyssinia for himself, and they said, yeah, you can have it. Again, the Czech government are being forced to give up their land to Hitler with no say in it. It's very bizarre. And the Sudetenland found themselves the newest members of Great Germany. They greeted Nazi soldiers with flowers, just like the Austrians had in March 1938. However, the Czechs were fearful because to them this was a real invasion. And then when we look at Czechoslovakia, you can see in the pictures of that the Czech people, it's the first time when Hitler does invade Czechoslovakia that people don't look happy about it. The USSR was also not consulted. Stalin felt betrayed and angry, which is really important when we come to look at the Nazi-Soviet Pact. Hitler was getting closer to countries that the USSR had close relationships with, and Stalin started questioning what he could do to prevent invasion by Hitler's forces. So at this time, when you can see Hitler marching through Europe as he is, it just becomes inevitable that he's going to then try to go into the USSR, because remember, one of his foreign policy aims was the destruction of communism. So Britain and France were losing a very powerful ally in the USSR, which they do then lose completely to the Nazis. So Chamberlain claims that the Munich Conference was a great victory for Britain because he had managed to avoid war. He signs an Anglo-German declaration that they would never go to war against each other. As a matter of fact, they do exactly the year after. And Chamberlain steps out of his private plane on his return to Britain, and he waves a copy of the Anglo-German declaration in the air and declares that he had achieved peace in our time. Now, you can watch that video on YouTube, and I would recommend for you to do so. And in Germany, Hitler declared that Europe could look forward to a peaceful Christmas because of the Munich Agreement, which was true. That is something that they were able to do, but it was very short-lived. So it is debatable whether you actually believe that Chamberlain did believe that this was peace in our time, or whether he knew that it was just delaying the inevitable. He's got a very misplaced root of optimism in his trust for Adolf Hitler. Many reasons there are for that. So when we think about how much Chamberlain wanted to avoid war, how they believed that the Treaty of Versailles had been too harsh, whether he actually quite admired Hitler and wanted to be an ally with him. Remember, this was before the atrocities of the Holocaust had come to light. It wasn't a secret how Jews were being persecuted in Nazi Germany, but the final solution was not yet in action. That was 1941. So there are very many different reasons and it could just be that appeasement was a delaying tactic. So there's two sides to this. Either you believe that Chamberlain was appeasing Hitler because he did believe that Hitler would not want war and he would eventually stop, or it's that Chamberlain was giving Britain time to build up their army ready for a Second World War, or at least a war against the Nazis. So it's just, again, for you to think about and to weigh up. Now, I'm going to use the Sudetenland as the source question, which I'm going to have a look at in the next video. So we're going to be having a look at the 12-mark question on source analysis. So please tune in for that, and we'll delve a little bit deeper into into the Sudetenland, and we'll have a look at how to tackle that quite tricky question. Okay, so thank you for joining. I hope this has been useful for you, and I will see you in the next video.